Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly webinar series, Embracing Change. Today, we have with us Henry Chong, a dear friend and someone who's been really spending a lot of time with various families and is here today to share with us anti-fragility from a family perspective and a family business perspective. We had Michel Gollet, who spoke about adaptability from the gut and the brain. And last week we had Mikra talking about all the different elements of health and looking at the body and how it is able to become anti-fragile from an experience as COVID. So welcome, Henry. Thank you very much for taking the time. I know it's dinner time for all of us in Hong Kong. So welcome. And please, let's start with what is anti-fragility from your perspective? I know we know Nassim Taleb's definition, but from your perspective in terms of families and family businesses and family offices, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? And what are your sharing? Just to begin.
Yes. No. Hello, and thank you, Feisal, for having me on this webinar today. Always good to chat. Well, maybe if I could just first talk about what to me anti-fragility means generally. I know you talked about that on your call last week, but I think it's worth highlighting again, because I think people confuse anti-fragility and resilience a lot, right? Resilience is something that we talk about a lot in today's world. It sounds nice. We all want to be resilient. We don't want to be fragile, certainly. And we'd like the idea of being strong and being able to weather the storm, as it were. And Taleb obviously came up with this concept of anti-fragility, where he said resilience is about being able to withstand a stress of some kind, pressure. And the more resilient you are, the more pressure you can withstand without breaking. But the thing is, at some point, you always hit that breaking point. Versus anti-fragility as a concept, where he says the more stress there is, the more pressure there is, the stronger you grow. I think a great example of this is the human body. We go to the gym to put specific stress on our body, hoping that as a result, we will grow stronger. And it's interesting, I think, to think about the fact that a lot of natural systems that you see in nature are anti-fragile by design. They're designed to take in stress and grow stronger as a result, versus a lot of human-made systems are designed to be resilient. They're designed to withstand a lot of stress, but if they break, then things can go horribly wrong. And we can talk about this later, but we see this a lot in our financial systems and indeed in a lot of our businesses. And just to further highlight, I think, the importance of understanding that distinction is, I've always liked this, there's this quote from, I think it's Ernest Hemingway, which a lot of people like to put on quote cards on Instagram that go something like, the world breaks all people, and afterwards some are strong at the broken places. And not many people realize that there's a second half to it. And he goes on to say that sooner or later, the world breaks everyone. And those it does not break, it kills, which is usually the part that people leave out from those fancy Instagram quote cards. And I think that's really instructive, actually, because I think what he's trying to say is that, life comes. And when life comes, it sometimes comes really fast. And when you have situations like today's world of COVID, where it seems like a lot of things are happening all at once, it really shows which systems were resilient and which are anti-fragile, which are just quite strong, but if you hit a certain breaking point, actually collapse. And I think Hemingway's point was that you need to recognize this fact. You need to be prepared for it. You need to understand that sooner or later, things will go wrong, things will break. And the question is, how can you learn from it, grow, recover, get stronger as a result? Because if you do not, then as he says, the world will kill you, as opposed to breaking you and then you get stronger later. And I think that point is obviously very relevant in today's world of COVID. There are so many businesses that are undergoing scenarios that they could not have even imagined. A lot of businesses do risk analysis and scenario planning. I'm sure a lot of airlines, for example, have had all kinds of models where they tried to estimate their future performance of their business. I'm willing to bet very few of them modeled for a world in which air travel and their resulting revenue dropped to effectively zero. And I know this for a fact because you see airlines getting into trouble left, right, and center, right? It just goes to show that they never really contemplated this. Even though if you sit down to think about it, if you said, hey, what is the chance on a long enough time frame in today's interconnected world, in the couple of decades that we have, what is the chance of there being some kind of pandemic, right? You would probably say, yes, on a long enough time frame, the probability approaches 1, right? So, hey, maybe we should be thinking about this. That's also why, Taleb has given interviews recently when we said, hey, COVID is not a black swan. A black swan is supposed to be an event that is unpredictable. Bill Gates 10 years ago was literally telling anyone who would listen, hey, we got to be prepared for a pandemic. George W. Bush, of all people, in 2004, I think received a report from the National Institute of Health in America warning against a flu-based pandemic and how it would cripple the US economy. And if you guys go on YouTube, you can find a video of him talking about it and trying to get funding from Congress, I think $1.5 billion to build influenza program so that they could prepare for this. But Congress never gave him the money because people said, not right now. And I think all of those are examples where in today's world, I think all of us have been suddenly forced to rethink for ourselves, for our families, for our businesses. Were we resilient, right? Or are we actually designed in such a way that when these kind of situations inevitably happen, we can rapidly adapt, we can grow from it, and we can come out of the other side stronger than ever before?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Most of us who run family businesses, and there's quite a number on the call today, the first analysis we did was how long can we survive the cash burn if we have zero revenue, right? Then 50%, 25%, 75%, whatever the number is. But it was really all about survival. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about becoming stronger. It wasn't about becoming agile. So first was really looking at the expense side and the burn side, right? And then I think much later, as this became a true reality that's not really going away, then you started to look at, wait a minute, how do we adapt? But again, adapting is not necessarily becoming stronger. It's just working with the new parameters. So what are you seeing? Along with, you're on the board of a trust company, the largest in Asia. What are you seeing? How are the families responding? And do you see them more on the side where I just explained, where we're just waiting and have enough burn or holding capacity? Or are you seeing people actually transforming themselves? What are you seeing?
I see a lot of exactly what you mentioned.
By sector,
which is,
right?
Yeah, I see a lot of that where families are, and businesses of all kinds, actually, I feel are in a wait and see mode. Everyone is trying to weather the storm. Everyone's trying to hunker down and say, if I can just hang on for the next few months, things will go back to the way that they were before. Again, the obvious example is airlines. I just need a little bit of cash so I can survive. And in 6 months, we can all go back to the way it was before. I don't think we are ever going back to the way things were before. I think that in the years to come, we will see 2020 and COVID it will have as big of a structural impact on the world as 9/11 did. And it'll be very similar to 9/11 in many ways, in that, the incident itself, it wasn't the direct impact. It was the structural changes, the way in which it shaped the world forever. And I think that, like it or not, we have all been plunged headfirst into a new digital reality. You and me, Feisal, we both live in the same city. We are sitting in the same city right now, and we're talking over Zoom. I think that's a perfect example of the fact that we're never going back to a pre-digital world. You suddenly have, hundreds of millions of people all over the world to understand how to use Zoom and are very willing to log into a webinar like this. Business travel is going to change forever. People are going to say, hey, I'm just going to jump on a Zoom call and talk to you instead of hopping on a plane just for one meeting. So if I were an airline, and I bring that up just because it's a very obvious example, I would be saying, how can we structurally shift our business for what is inevitably this new reality? And, I guess one thing that is worth thinking about is, people talk about adaptability a lot, right? They say, oh, we need to be agile in today's world, right? We need to be agile, we need to be adaptable. And, when Darwin first talked about, everyone talks about survival of the fittest, But really what he wanted to talk about was survival of the most adaptable. But very specifically, if you talk to an evolutionary biologist, fitness is a function of your ability to function in a very specific environment, right? You cannot measure fitness separate from the environment. It's always relevant to a specific context. And I think that's very pertinent today because the context has shifted dramatically. And in today's world, with technology, context can shift so quickly and so dramatically that you could be the fittest for a pre-COVID environment and suddenly find yourself not fit at all for a post-COVID environment. And that is, I think, what people need to, and just saying, sort of reshift the mindset, where it's not just how can we hang on and weather the storm, how can we use this just like a stressor in the gym to actually grow and radically redefine our business in such a way that we are adapted for the new context. Right? For example, for our own business, that means I'm not sure we're going to go back to holding in-person events ever again, right? When we're starting to do lots of these kinds of webinars all across our business and just generally in terms of how we interact with people, and we've realized that we can use this to interact at scale with a lot more people, to people spread in a lot more different places than we ever could before. To us, this is not just oh, well, we can't meet you in person, so we'll do it online. Yeah. To us, this is how we plan to do things as just part of the new world order going forward.
But okay, so this is not a replacement, let's say, for in-person, and it's a new way of being, right? Yeah. But the thing is, as the businesses go in and start, and as families are sitting saying, I now have the time to reflect what is important and who is important. Yes. How is that impacting? Do you see families where their purpose, their mission, and their visions are being shifted as a result? Or is it that everybody's still focused on the financial side? Yes. What are you seeing? Or are they just in denial?
I see some people starting to think about those questions, but the truth is, I think a lot of people are in denial, and they're in denial over the fact that they're in denial. As you mentioned, right? So they're focused on, hey, I am tough and I am strong, right? Look at me, I have so much cash reserves that I've built up over time. I am doing good in this environment. Not realizing, as I said, that that's besides the point. Right? It's even if you had enough cash reserves to survive for the next 4 years, right? If your business and your family is not adapted for this new context, this new environments, things can shift very rapidly anyway. It doesn't matter if you have all the cash in the world, your business is going to slowly go one way. We see this in tech companies all the time, where you grow big and you just hang on to a given business model. Right. And looking back, it's always easy to say, how could they not have seen that trend? Right? How could Nokia, the world's biggest manufacturer of mobile phones, not recognize that smartphones, mobile, is going to be the big thing? How did they go from being the world's biggest phone manufacturer to honestly not existing at all? And I actually think that it has a lot to do with what you said, where I do believe that a lot of these things come down to the psychology of the leadership, of the people who are guiding and operating the businesses. Tony Robbins has a great line where he says that chokehold in any business is always the psychology of its leader. 80% of it is psychology, not strategy, right? And I think that it's very rarely the case when a business or a family sits down and says, no, we do not want to adapt, right? No one believes that they're sticking their heads in the sand, right? No one does that as a conscious decision. But they just, especially I think when you're so reflexive, when things are coming thick and fast and you're just in that reactive mode, it's very hard to step back and sort of look at the bigger picture. And in the moment, you think that you are doing a good job by optimizing for the short term, not realizing that you'll end up being completely out of context for the long term.
So how, let's get a little more tangible now. So what are the questions? Like this week in one of our businesses, we asked the key management to relook at and say, you know everything that you know, you have all the data, you have all the information. How would you rebuild this business? So what would you be doing? Where would you operate? And who would be in the system? But the key question also was, would you actually be in this business? which is the hardest question, right? So what are the questions that we should, as all of us on this call and those who will hear later on the recording, should be asking ourselves to be able to help us move through this, right? So Jim Collins, you know, how the mighty fail talked about the upside and the downside and the truthful reflection. So when 2000, before 2000, you know, the financial crisis happened, that was a question being asked in Dubai. And most people were in denial, not willing to look at that the upside was maybe 15, 20 and the downside was easily 50, but they didn't want to accept that, and the reality happened. So what are the questions that they should ask, you know, beyond what I just said? What should they be, or what do you suggest?
Yes. No, I think starting with exactly what you said, right? Should we be in this business? Why are we in this business? Exactly. Right. I think very often people don't actually sit down to answer that question. It just is, especially for a lot of families, and especially for a lot of families in Asia. The business is so entwined with your sense of self and your identity, right? It is part of who you are, and you become a family business as opposed to a family in business, as people might say, right? And it's just, you know, families stop thinking about it as we are a family unit who happens to run a business, but what's important is the family. And maybe we can find a new business, or we can change the business. They become so entwined with the business that they cannot even conceive of a world in which that business changes. Right. And again, this is true of not just family companies. It's true, I think, of a lot of companies. And I'd like to talk about the big tech companies as an example, because I think it's very clear, and it's always easy to see when it's someone else, right? When it's not yourself.
Yeah, but you're in the tech space, so
yes, yes, and
in that space, so
exactly, right? No, but when we look back, right, we look at the IBMs of the world, at the Nokias of the world, and we say these are people who were at the cutting edge of what they did. Right? They had all the expertise and all the capacity. How could they not see these trends coming when it would have been so obvious if you had just asked anybody? If you would have asked your teenage daughter, they could have told you that this was the future. And yet somehow they just didn't. They just didn't adapt. And I think that's because, again, whether you're a family business or a large corporation, what you do becomes so entrenched with your identity that you stop asking why you were doing it in the first place. And I think that a lot of the companies that have been able to transform across time, across different contexts, and that are resilient, are companies that stay very focused on why they're doing that business and what their business really is in terms of what value they're delivering to their customers, as opposed to just their products, right? They fall in love with what they do and forget why they do it. For example, you know, I think that, you know, companies like Amazon have always been very good at saying, hey, you know, maybe now we sell books, but that's not really our business, right? Our business is figuring out how can we deliver a wider selection of products to more people quicker, right? And if you stay focused on that, it allows you to be much more flexible and innovative as the times change in different contexts. Right? You can focus on what are you really delivering as a service, as opposed to just saying, no, I'm a bookseller.
So now so you're saying the why, and then obviously the how, right?
Yes.
But so in your own business, right, that you're now obviously into, you know, you've created one of the few or the only digital exchange that you've done. I mean, this obviously happened way pre-COVID, right? So if you were to repeat that, what would be different, right? If you were doing the same exercise and you knew what you knew, what would you do differently? Or would there be much difference?
I don't think we would have changed what we're doing. We would have done it even more and even faster. So we built Fusang as a provider of financial infrastructure for digital assets, because our business, our main family business, provides financial infrastructure for traditional assets, non-digital assets. To give you an example, we act as company secretaries to tens of thousands of companies. You know, we have armies of people in back rooms who do paperwork, sometimes literal physical paperwork in terms of managing companies. Now, not a lot of people will see that. They don't have direct contact with it, but we do. And we said, we have a business that is based on a lot of people and a lot of paper. And in 2020, or in the 21st century, businesses based on people and paper are not going to survive, right? What exactly are we doing? What is the real object? It's not just filing some paperwork, right? What we're really providing, for example, if we're managing a company, is it's our job to make it easy, right, to handle all of this administration so that a company can focus on doing their business as opposed to having to focus on doing the admin of operating a company, filing board meetings, etc. Right? We can do that for them. And if we focus on that outcome, then maybe we can rethink how we can do that. Maybe we can focus on how can we do this digitally? How can we use things like blockchain technology to make that a bit easier? But again, that's the how, that's the product layer. Right? The question is, can we transform our business? Because if we don't, someone else will do it for us, right? Like it or not, sooner or later, someone else is going to come along and they will do it. Again, I cannot imagine that in the 21st century, businesses that are entirely based on people and paper will long survive. So to us, this was just an inevitable thing that we had to do, like it or not. And that's why we started building this a couple of years back. If we had had the benefit of foresight, I think we would have just done it even more and even faster. For example, over the last few months, we have made a decision that we don't want to do, as I said, in-person events anymore. We don't want to go to conferences. We don't want to run booths at conferences. We want to go full digital, 100%. All of our communication will be digital. The events, if you can call it that, will be done like this. Digitally as well. And in hindsight, we probably would have jumped on that train even sooner.
But what about the human connection, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're human beings that need that connection, right? So of course we do all these things by Zoom, but there is a point in time where meeting together, to not all of us are trained maybe as well as you are or others to be able to use the gut and the heart and the brain and be able to have that instinct come on through Zoom, right? Not everybody can get that feel.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree.
Aren't we losing the element of humanity through this? Or is it just we're going to adapt and our brain, which obviously takes a very long time to adapt, will be able to adapt faster because it hasn't, right? I mean, right now, even receiving messages and all is the same, giving us the same hit as, multiple drugs do, right? So
yes, absolutely.
How is that?
No, I completely agree, right? That it is about the human elements. But I guess the question I would say is, if you were a company and you went to a trade show with a booth, was it really the human element you were focusing on, right? I mean, that's what I mean, right? Are you focusing on the outcome? Is there a different way you can achieve that outcome? There are drawbacks to doing things digitally, right? But like all things, you just need to adapt to the new environment. How, as you said, how can we run digital events that still feel personal? That's just a challenge we're going to have to face. No different than in-person events. How many of us have been to conferences and felt the human touch, right? You sit in a big room, you listen to a bunch of people speak. I bet you feel that it is quite impersonal, actually. And that's what I mean by, I think we need to focus on, what is our business really? What are we delivering to our customers? What matters to our customers, right? I'm not saying that the human element is going to go away, far from it. I think if anything, this COVID period has forced a lot of people, I hope it's forcing a lot of people to take a step back and think about what really matters. Both personally and in terms of their business. A lot of people I talk to say that they spend a lot less time in meetings, that they realize a lot of their time was spent meeting people ostensibly for a business reason. But suddenly, when you have something like Zoom, where I can talk to anyone, anywhere, you realize, oh, actually, those are not the people I want to talk to, right? I'd actually much rather talk to this person because that's really the highest value activity that I can do.
So do you think, in terms of anti-fragility, now a lot of people are working from home. Do you think now people are going to adapt to that? Are they becoming stronger from that experience? How does that really, convert, right? Does that because of anti-fragility, or is that because it's more convenient? Is it just, it feels good, I'm home? How does that play out?
Like I said, to me, that's the context, right? So the world environment has changed, like it or not. Right? Like it or not, at least this remote work, some of the time, working from home can and will become more of a norm. If nothing else, because this isn't going to be the last pandemic that we will see, right? These things can and will happen again. And as our world gets more and more interconnected, it will happen more and more frequently. So like it or not, that's just the environment. It's changed. And the question is, how do we adapt to maximize our fitness, if you can call it that, in the environment, right? Recognizing that some human elements, no, they don't change so quickly, as you said, right? Yes, humans still want a personal touch. So the question is, how can I deliver that remotely? Is there a way that rather than just, again, viewing it as something resilient, oh, I have to do a webinar, so I'll make the best of it as I can, I'll get an 80% solution. Is there a way that we can rethink things in such a way that we have even more of a human element than we did before, even though we have this digital environment today? I don't have all the answers, but to me, this is exactly the questions that people need to grapple with. And whoever can come up with innovative solutions for these answers is going to do extremely well in the coming years.
So, excuse me, do you think VR, I mean, I've been proposed to start distributing VR goggles to all the families that we serve around the world to be able to have a much more in-person experience. Mm-hmm. When I ask my kids, they're telling me the technology isn't that great. Yeah. So what are you hearing? And
I also think that it's too easy to, again, get caught up in the tech, to get caught up in the how, right? I think VR can be useful in the same way that video conferencing is a huge improvement over audio only, but it's just the technology, right? The tech does not in and of itself give you the human elements. And if I think people are too focused on the tech, they'll miss the point completely, right? People will just say, I want a better and better video quality. I want more and more immersive, a live-like experience, forgetting that the whole point was, hey, are you having a human-to-human connection in the first place? Right.
So let's say you're asking about the why. So the Japanese ask why 5 times, but when you sit with people like Robin Sharma or the others, yes, they will ask you to sit, knee to knee and ask the same question 40, 50 times and do it while you journal. So are you seeing families ask that question in an open forum and be able to really move through that? Or do you see a lot of resistance? Let's forget about the ones who are in denial, but the ones yes, who are really going through this exercise. How are they doing it, if you can share with us?
Mm-hmm. Like I said, sadly, I think it is rare. Generally, not just families. I think a lot of people in today's world are not quite ready to take that step yet. But of the people who are, I think, I see a lot of people actually who are quite excited about this period, right? There's a lot of tragedy in the world today, unfortunately. But I also think that, like I said, like it or not, we've been shocked. We've been jolted out of the old existence and the old context and thrust unavoidably into this new world. And at least for some people, I know that you can no longer deny that the world has changed, that the context has changed. And so as a result, people who are open to it are saying, hey, I've been putting this off for a while, but this is the perfect time for me to relook myself, my life. How do I think about what is really important to me, right? What do I actually want personally out of life, and what do I want my business to achieve? I know a lot of people who've taken this period to get fit, right? A lot of people are stuck in one place. I have been in one city now for probably 4.5 months. I don't think I've ever been in one spot without moving for this long in decades. I've never been to the gym as consistently as I've probably ever. So I think a lot of people are saying, hey, this is just a great time to take a step back and reevaluate, right? To focus on what really matters in our lives. I personally know that I've reconnected with a lot of friends that I just haven't for a long time. Because again, given that I have to do Zoom calls with everyone anyway, I don't have to talk to people out of convenience, like logistical convenience. They happen to be in my neighborhood, so I'll chat to them, right? I might as well chat to the people, to the friends who I'm closest with, who matter the most to me. And I think that some people who are thinking this way personally have also started to apply the exact same thinking to their businesses, to their families, to say, okay, well, same thing. What matters most to us as a business, right? Maybe our business is deeply based on the human touch and the human elements. And actually, we should be focusing just on that and forget all the other distractions that were distracting us from doing that in the first place, even when we had the opportunity to sit face to face with people. I mean, how many of us actually sit with someone at a meal or in person and really truly connect, right? How many of us just sit and you talk about whatever, right? And you never get below the surface layer. So again, to me, it's the technology is not the point, right? You were sitting side by side. It's true of families, right? A lot of families, you sit at a dinner table, especially in Asia. Every Sunday you meet for a family meal. But how many of you really connect? How many of you are really present, right? You can be more present sitting on a Zoom call than if you are on a family dinner tapping away on your phones.
So in terms of taking that, right? So you feel that there's more family forums, there's more conversation between families. I mean, we're serving them. We're seeing a lot more conversation, but then we're also seeing the other end where there's so much togetherness, but not, I mean, I'm talking the nuclear family, that it's become very challenging. But on the broader sense, right? I mean, you're running, the trust side. Are you seeing more forums? Are you seeing kind of workshops happening, retreats happening, or is that really put to the side?
I am starting to see more and more conversations. Like I said, I think a lot of them are still focused on resilience as opposed to anti-fragility. So a lot of people are starting to think about these questions. And in many cases, people are starting to think about the right questions. It's just that they haven't yet switched that mindset. It's still in reactive mode as opposed to proactive mode, right? People are saying, as you mentioned, okay, well, we have to do digital technology. Let's make the best of it, right? Like we'll try and mitigate the downside as opposed to being willing to rethink things from the ground up and say, how could we make this even better than it was before? I know you, for example, are personally very excited by these webinars, right? Where you get to interact with people at a scale that you never did before.
No, for us, it's been a beautiful experience, right? I mean, health and well-being is today a priority beyond anything we've ever seen. But at the same time, in terms of the business side, right, we're still seeing a lot of the CEOs still spending most of their time and energy on that side because they've been disrupted so heavily, right? And whatever time they have, they're using that to either exercise or be coached or to meditate or whatever form to protect their bodies, right? Because they won't be able to sustain this. Yes. And with the experiences we're having with COVID, coming back and forth, and we're having all these, these rides, people really don't know how long this is going to last. Nobody can answer that question, right? Yes. So the thing is that again, I mean, beyond the why, right? Why am I in this business? What else can we do? Is there any other guidance that you can give in terms of, to families or to family businesses as to how do we become more anti-fragile, right? Are we really going to become stronger, right? Is this pain or this disruption, do we have to start, I mean, obviously I've written a book where I talk about embracing what is, trusting life, being calm and centered, having clarity. Yes, that is exactly what is needed at this moment in time. But the thing is, as one person or as a leader, it works, but as a large family, it can become very challenging. So do you feel that flow is something that is achievable and being achieved by families, or is this more disarray and anxiety and fear?
Both, unfortunately. But in terms of thinking about these things, something I've personally been thinking a lot about recently is just the power of asking the right questions. It sounds very simple, but it's sort of a truism of, ask a better question, get a better answer. And we rarely do. We rarely are willing to ask questions that can shift their mindset. So for example, just sitting down to ask a question like, how could this period actually be great for myself, for my family, for my business, right? How could this period actually be transformational, right, for our business? What if we wanted to, in the next 12 months, double our business? What would we need to do to achieve that, right? And just shifting that mindset out of the question I think that a lot of people are asking, which is, how do we hang on? How do we survive? How do we make it through the next 6 months?
So you're saying move from defense to offense.
Exactly. And just shift some of the questions you ask, right? A simple question like that. What if we wanted to double the size of our business in the next 12 months? Right? That would force you to rethink a lot of these things. I know that both of us have been asking these questions exactly because we are doing something like this, right? I'm sure all of this came about from you asking yourself a different question, a better question, right? What if I could use this period to connect even more people than I did before, right? What if or how could I, deliver even more value to these people, or communicate or share even more than I would have before? I think sometimes it is as simple as asking these questions, but we don't because they're hard. Right? Coming up with answers is hard, as you said. Doing the 5 whys, doing the layers and going deep is not easy. And we often don't like the answers, right? You ask a better question, you get a better answer, and then you have to go do it, right? And sometimes that means, oh, actually, we need to transform our business. Sometimes it means, as you said, maybe we should be in a different business. And those are not easy answers.
Yeah, but liquidating at this moment in time is also quite challenging, right? I mean, but again, if you don't see the upside, right? If you look at a business and you say the upside is maybe 10, 20%, and the downside is even if it's similar or lower, right? But to liquidate at this time, is not, the timing isn't great. But so then do you hang on or do you exit? Or do you sell to someone who sees an opportunity that you don't see, right? So these are the questions that are being asked by a number of people, right? Who are in a business where they know that when they ask themselves the why at a purpose level, as a vision and a mission level, it doesn't fit anymore, right? Not because the business is not good. It's just that it doesn't give me the juice or the feeling that I had post-COVID, because who matters and what matters has changed. Now, do you feel bringing in maybe external advisors to help you ask those questions, right? Because remember, the values in the question, the answer keeps changing, right? So we always say 95% is the quality of the question, right? So do you see people bringing in advisors to ask those hard questions? Or is that really not happening and people are kind of trying to do a DIY themselves?
Some, like I said, sadly, I think a lot of people are not even asking those questions in the first place, right? I see a very few people who are willing to make those changes, but the people that I see who are sitting down to ask the hard questions are actually doing it in a manner, at a scale in which they wouldn't have before. So a lot of the people I think who are not just surviving, but thriving during this period are people who have asked themselves some version of the question in some way or another: how can I use this period again to transform my business in a way that I couldn't 12 months ago, right? What are the opportunities that I have that I actually did not have 12 months ago? Even down to simple things like change. I actually find my instinct is that if you want to make dramatic changes in yourself, in your family, in your business, this is actually the perfect time to do it. There's something about moments of great change that make all change a bit easier somehow. When things are just status quo and going along and smooth, it's just harder. Even internally within organizations, within our own family businesses, we have found that we've been able to move at a speed that we could not have 12 months ago. Because 12 months ago, people would have said, everything is fine, don't touch it, right? But suddenly we say, hey, we want to radically transform things. And people say, okay, I'm on board. So I think a question people need to ask themselves is, what could I do today that I couldn't do 12 months ago? I don't think we could have run a webinar like this and the webinar series that you've been running with as much success 12 months ago. People were just not used to it.
If you would have asked me pre-COVID to even consider doing 3 a week like we did, I would have asked you to leave the office, right? Even you, with all due respect. Yes. So the next question I have, we have parents here, and including myself, and obviously there's some who are going back to university, and that's becoming a question, right? Is that online experience really going to be okay? Or should we delay that question, right? I mean, delay that experience and defer 1 year. The other question is for those who have graduated and have jobs, right? And now, because of the risk factor, they may be in countries or living, or have jobs in countries that are more risky, quote unquote. Should we actually encourage them to not take that risk and take away from that vital time? I mean, we were all in our 20s. And that was the time where, we were ready to conquer the world. And now some of those opportunities are being questioned, right? So what are you seeing, or what I know you're still not at that stage, but you know, you've just experienced, I mean, you know, you're turning 30. I'll announce it this Saturday. So, you know, at the end of the day, what do you feel from their side? Speak as somebody who's graduated or going to university. From their side, what do you see, and what should the parents consider?
Like I said, I think, like it or not, the world has shifted, right? And no amount of wishing that we could go back to the way things were will make it so. Things will be more online and more digital than they ever have before. And I know that this is a fact because that's the way things have been trending anyway. COVID, in many ways, has not changed anything. It's just accelerated a lot of trends dramatically. It's leapfrogged things 5 years ahead. But if you look at any trend in terms of how education is running, now, never mind education, if you look at where the average 12-year-old spends their time today, of their waking hours, what are they doing exactly? How do they interact with their friends? How do they communicate? I was listening to this, I was on another webinar actually about online gaming. The person speaking made the simple argument or the simple observation. He said, you know, parents feel that they want to be engaged with their children. So, you know, you say, okay, I'll play tennis because my son plays tennis and I want to bond with him. I want to have something that we can share. And with sport, we're like, yeah, that's how it should be because that's the way it's always been. Oh, but my son plays Fortnite? No way. Right? Somehow that's different. But again, like it or not, you know, the average 12-year-old, their primary form of entertainment and increasingly their primary form of socializing is through online gaming. So if you as a parent want to go where your child is, to interact with them, to spend time with them, you should be figuring out how you can play Fortnite, right? And that's what I mean by, look, the world is shifting. And I guess the thing is, though, the world is always shifting. The world is always changed. Right? Technology is always changing. In some of my presentations, I have this slide I like to show, which says, it's this old quote from, I think, 1912 in the New York Times, where they were complaining about how the speed of information is too fast and people are too distracted and there's too much noise. And the picture is of people on the subway holding the newspaper, all looking down, reading the newspaper, not talking to each other. And then you have today, 2020, everyone on the subway looking down on their phones, not talking to each other, you know? And I guess the point is, you know, people don't change, right? Times change, technologies change, environments change. But, you know, we always talk about change like it's something that's happening all of a sudden, right? The way things used to be, those were the good old days. This is the new and the uncertain, right? Just like how every generation of parents always thinks that it's going to hell with their kids, right? Every generation of music is all wrong. My generation was the right one. You guys, I don't know what you're listening to. So it's always like that. And to go back to my point at the start, like way back when Charles Darwin was talking about these things is, hey, like it or not, the environment shifts. The environment has shifted. Sometimes it shifts a lot quicker and a lot more dramatically than before. And this is just the world we live in today. And the question is, how can we optimize it? How do we become fittest for this environment? And I think simple examples like, hey, right, if kids these days play online games, if I as a parent want to connect with my kid, maybe I should be thinking about that.
Now, what about entrepreneurship, right, and startups? I mean, in this period of time, there were a lot of things on the sidelines that a lot of families and family businesses and family offices weren't considering because they felt they were too out there or too risky or too understandable, right? They weren't just able to even go there. Do you see those coming on the table because of what has just happened? Do you see people a lot more open and listening, or are they just buried in the sand because they're just trying to hang in there?
Like I said, some people are, right? Some people have said, again, like it or not, the world has shifted and we better get on this, right? And again, I actually don't think there's any difference with that either. Whenever we go through these large seismic changes, there will always be people who are willing to adapt and people who aren't. That hasn't changed either, right? In all of this time. Inevitably, there will be families and businesses that just don't shift. And there will be the few who do and can do it quickly and rapidly and will get to capture the new world that we live in. And I think the big challenge is always, how do you sustain that, right? Every large business that you see today, including family businesses, all started at some point from nothing. And in many cases, they grew big precisely because the founder or that initial group of people were brave enough to try something new, to create a business that was adapted for their context, for their environments, and then grew this into a behemoth. But something shifts, I guess, when you're a large business or a large family. Something shifts when you have wealth, right? Both for individuals and for companies. And maybe it's a little part of human nature where we just start to think a bit about, how do I protect what I have? When you have nothing, it's very easy to just kind of go for it, right? And suddenly when you've got a lot, people shift and they start worrying about, how do I not lose what I have? As opposed to, how do I create?
But that's more from the founder perspective, right? So I didn't have, today I have, and therefore I'm focused on not losing it. But the next generation has grown up with it, right? And it's just a way of life. It's money is just like air, right? It's just, you know, it's just there, right? So their mindset is very different. I don't think that they are, you know, I'm third generation. I was not born with nothing where I'm fearing losing it all, right? Even though we continuously have that fear because of realities of life, but not because of being born without. So with the second and third gen, are you seeing that they have a very different approach? They're able to go more offense, but is it a grounded offense? And what are the businesses that you're seeing? Are there any startups that you can share or ventures that people are doing that were maybe not listened to by the families 4 or 5 months ago?
I think that when people have a lot, I personally see a very sharp bifurcation where either people don't do much with it at all, and they just kind of want to sit on what they have because it's comfortable, or they really run with it. I actually see both extremes, right? I see people who say, okay, well, we had what we had before, and we're going to think about how can we radically redefine that. You know, I guess an example we were talking recently is the Chow Tai Fook family here in Hong Kong. They started off selling jewelry, and then they moved from that into real estate. They changed their real estate very rapidly, right? They went very upscale in terms of how they built a lot of those buildings. And now actually they're moving rapidly into other things as well, right? They're backing one of the digital banks here in Hong Kong. They're doing many ventures in the digital space. Because I think the younger generation, who is now really leading the show, recognizes that pressure of, hey, I grew up in a world where everybody is, like, primary form of education is video games, not going out to malls anymore, right? What does that mean for our family, right? Like it or not, in 20 years' time, these trends will only accelerate, so we better get on it. So I actually think that in some cases, the younger generation, precisely because they say, hey, I'm going to be around for a while, right? I'm going to see the endpoint of these trends. I'm going to be the ones that these things fall upon. We better think about how do we radically redefine things and start doing it right now. But sadly, I also see the complete opposite, where people say, oh, I have, and it's comfortable. And it's not just second or third generations. I think all of us, even sometimes those same founders who at one point in their life were so entrepreneurial and so risk-taking, suddenly become very stuck, right? And I don't know, maybe people fall in love with their ideas and their products and their companies, and they fail to recognize that the idea, the product that once was so revolutionary now isn't anymore. And I think that when you have founder-led companies or family-led companies, it gives them the opportunity to make dramatic shifts. But it doesn't mean that they will, right? It cuts both ways. When you have a large degree of central control, it sometimes means that no shifts happen at all because they, you know, if they don't sign off on it, nothing happens. It also means, though, that if they're willing to take the plunge, they can make things happen very, very quickly. And I think that, again,
as the patriarchs and matriarchs are living longer and longer, right?
Yes.
The stage of letting go, right? And if you look at if you look at the math, and let's see how the math changes going forward. Most people historically have made and crushed it from the age of 50 to 60 plus, right? So it's between 50 and 70, more towards the 65 is where most of the previous wealth was actually created. Now, is that number actually going to shift, or are people still believing that is the time because we have, quote unquote, the wisdom, the experience, or are we going to become non-relevant because we're not staying with the times, we're not playing Fortnite or Minecraft with the children?
I think just as technology has nothing to do with it, I think age has nothing to do with it. Old doesn't mean that you can't be innovative, right? Come on. I don't know, maybe
we have a 20-year gap between the two of us. We're actually one generation apart.
I realize, but listen, maybe it means that it's less likely for people to do it, but it certainly doesn't mean people can't. The chairman of our stock exchange in Malaysia is, he is many generations above you, right? Close to 30 years older than you are. And he is extremely technologically savvy, right?
Wow. Okay.
He, I guess, signed on to be the chairman of a digital asset exchange precisely because he himself trades digital assets on his mobile phone. I don't think it has anything to do with age. Again, we can point to numerous examples where people have, I guess, that mindset of radically redefining things. I think it's more to do with comfort. I think that when we get comfortable, right, we inevitably fall, if we're not careful, into that resilient mode, where we start to want to protect what we have, as opposed to trying to think about what could we build. And I think that sometimes it's as simple as a question like that, right? Asking a different question.
So from what I'm hearing, I mean, we've been speaking for the last 50 minutes. What I'm hearing is you're saying, let's embrace, right? We talk about embrace what is as a first step in flow, but you're really saying, let's embrace and not resist what is coming, whether the differences are coming from the next generation or even within this generation, right? And whether it's being forced upon us and accelerated, like you said, 5 years or whatever. I think it's even more than 5 years in a lot of instances, that what COVID has created. And from that, try to look at it, okay, if this is the new reality, what will life look like? Right? And how do I make the most of it and create the best service or product or whatever business one of us are in, or actually even family environment, right? I mean, many of us myself, I'm privileged that my parents are with me, but many people have had their parents apart. And that has been a very, very challenging experience, right? So even in the business side, right? A lot of people were traveling continuously to their locations because they were, they're running global companies, and now realizing that they're operating very well without those every monthly visits or whatever that is, right? So is that what I'm hearing? You're saying that let's relook at everything we resisted, right? Maybe make a resistance list. What have I been resisting, pre-COVID and during COVID, and reconsider and say, how can I begin to embrace those realities that no matter how much I resist are going to happen anyway, right? Exactly. Whether it's ideas of the next generation changing their values or having a complete different way of being, right? And start to look at, maybe start from that question rather than saying, okay, why am I doing it? Let's look at what am I resisting? Right? And what is really triggering me the most, and why is it triggering me? I mean, this is just, I'm extrapolating from our conversation. Do you think maybe that's one way to go? Or you think
usually the resistance is exactly where you need to go. All of us, right? I think in life, we always look for solutions that are complex, but easy, right? Again, look at health, right? Or going to the gym. People think that if we can just find this super complex answer, right, then it'll be super easy and I'll be fit. And oftentimes the truth is the other way around. It's simple, but it's hard. And in my experience, actually, most things in life that are true, with a capital T, are simple, but hard. And that's why we don't like them. We don't like those answers. We say, no. I'm going to find the complex but easy solution, right? And so usually the thing that we resist is exactly what we need to change. And sometimes I think it's as simple as asking, what if, right? What if actually this period were an incredible gift? What if, right, in the midst of all of this tragedy and all of this chaos, what if this was actually the shock we needed to take ourselves to the next level? Like I said, I know a lot of people who are thinking about it that way. They say, oh, actually, this is exactly what I needed as a wake-up call to start looking at my own health, right? Maybe this was exactly the wake-up call that we needed to say, now that my family cannot meet physically, we've removed that pretense of, hey, it's just in the same room we are connected. Now we can no longer avoid that discussion. Now we actually need to focus on, hey, are we connecting or not, right? We can't avoid that anymore. We can't kid ourselves. And likewise for businesses, like it or not, you have been jolted out of the old way of doing things. And I think that we should say, hey, what if this was exactly what we needed? To sit down and rethink, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What is the value that we are providing to our customers, right? Why should anybody care about what we do? You know, and I ask that question a lot internally, right? I'm like, why would anyone be interested in what we're doing? We know why. Why is our customer interested? Why do they want to talk to us, right?
But do you go out and ask them? Do you actually go out and ask on a weekly basis, bring somebody in? I mean, I used to do it in the old days when we started Geneticare. I'd bring somebody in once a month, somebody much younger, to say, why does it even matter, right? Does this even matter? Does this relate? Do you even care? Is this relevant?
Yes. More and more, we're trying to, I try and even like meetings, I try and start by saying, hey, what is your, like the other party, right? I know why I am here and what I want to achieve. What do you want to achieve? Because sometimes if you don't ask that question, you both have two completely different objectives. And it's like two ships passing in the night. We've all had those meetings when you're talking and you're like, wait a minute, we're not communicating here, right? So I think again, right? And I actually think that in many cases, digital technology really forces you to think about these things, right? It removes the pretense of we're just going to sit in the same room and chat for a while, right? It's like, hey, we decided to connect. Why? Right? Why are we doing this? Why are we talking? You know, and I guess one thing that has really, that this period has really brought into focus for me is time, right? I think a lot of us were just, you know, we all get used to certain routines and living in a certain way. And a significant portion of the world now suddenly is sitting at home, or at least sitting in one country, and we're moving a lot less. Because I think it's very easy to get distracted by being busy, right? We're always on the road. A lot of CEOs, as you mentioned, I gotta go visit all my locations, and I'm so busy, always doing these things. And because I'm so busy, I must be doing a good job, right? And suddenly you're at home and you say, okay, I have all day. I wake up in the morning, I've got all of these hours. What do I do? What exactly am I going to spend my time on? I have this 1 hour. I can talk to anybody anywhere, right? Maybe if you're a large distributed company, you can literally talk to any of your employees anywhere in the world. Who do you talk to? What do you talk about? Why do you want to talk to them? I think it's really forced a lot of us to take a step back and think about some of these things. And I think that for the people who are willing to ask these questions, right, to ask the what if questions, this can actually be the greatest period, right? And I certainly hope that for myself, for my family, for our companies, when we look back, we'll say, wow, actually 2020 was the year. It was exactly what we hoped it would be. When we looked back, and it was the catalyst we needed to shift and take advantage of the fact that the world was changing anyway, like it or not.
All right, Henry, thank you very much. We're out of time. I was going to ask you for a closing remark, but I think you just nailed it. So anything else you want to add before we go? And we have Gino coming in next week. I think you know Gino Yu, who's going to talk about you know, he's going to go into the scope of how the body and the physiology is impacted, right? And he's going to go through personal development and see how that's being, you know, shifted and transformed. So any last words before we head out?
No, like I said, maybe I would just ask people, try asking a different question, right? Flip it around. Instead of focusing on being resilient, say, hey, what if we were using this period to grow, right? Not just how can we defend, but what if this was great? How could this be better, right? And sometimes I think it's as simple as that. Say, hey, what if actually this were flipped? What if this were the other way around? What could that mean, right?
All right. Thank you very much, Henry. So next week we have Dr. Gino Yu coming in to talk with us. And then the week after that, we have Jonathan that's going to be talking about inner wealth, something that again, you know, is accessible, but at times challenging for most of us. And we'll go through together some of the questions to ask, and some of them are very similar to what you just described, Henry, today. So thank you very much, Henry, for the time, the honor and privilege to have this dialogue. And everyone, thank you very much for the honor and privilege to be here and to be of service. And we'll see you next week. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
Thanks.